Well, hi everybody, it's meteorologist Joe Chaffee. Monday, April the 8th. Tax day is a week from today, folks, okay? Just as a reminder, 2019. And I hope you enjoyed your weekend. Weather was actually quite nice out my way. Lots of sunshine both Saturday and Sunday. Even the clouds Saturday morning burned off pretty early. The clouds that came in Sunday afternoon came in relatively late, so I managed to squeeze out a really, really nice day. Now we're into a new week, and I have to tell you, the weather over the last week to 10 days has been, even longer than that, has actually, for the most part, been relatively quiet. This week, it's going to be, I think, especially busy across the United States. There's something for everybody here. So if you're into severe weather, if you're into snowstorms, if you're into thunderstorms, whatever it is that you're looking at, there's something for you this week. Very, very busy pattern indeed shaping up, with a busy trough in the west and all kinds of short waves running around in the east. So let's start off tonight with the watches and warnings map, because we haven't seen it like this in a while, and it kind of looks like a bit of a Christmas tree this evening. So you can take a look at here from the Weather Service page, weather.gov. Let's start off in northern Maine, where we have winter storm warnings up. It's kind of a 1-2 punch with what's happening in Maine. The weather system that went through today, and then there's another one that's coming through for later tomorrow and tomorrow night. And snow amounts up in the warning area could be on the order of up to 10 inches. So let's make it an even number and just say up to a foot is possible in some places in the winter storm warning area. Winter weather advisories on the northern side and on the southern side, except the extreme southwestern corner of Maine. Further south on the other side, and not that many miles further south across Virginia and South Carolina, we have an ongoing severe thunderstorm watch, and we've already seen some warnings going up in a few places with regards to rainfall. Haven't seen any severe thunderstorm warnings yet, but they could certainly pop up, judging by the activity on the radar. And if you're watching this, remember it's 6:01 Eastern Time. So when it comes to severe weather, you want to make sure you get the latest information. If you're watching this on a replay, or you're watching this later on tonight sometime, make sure you go to weather.gov to your local National Weather Service office to see what the status of the severe weather is for your particular area. Now, let's jump over to the plains, where we have an expanding area of winter storm watches that are up for much of northeastern Wyoming, all of the state of South Dakota, a small portion of southwestern Minnesota, about half of Nebraska, and northwestern Kansas into northeastern Colorado. And that particular storm is going to generate strong winds. So we've got high wind warnings up through much of West Texas, red flag warnings in New Mexico, and in eastern Colorado, where it's exceptionally dry. So we've got fire risk there. High wind warnings in parts of Southern California, northeastern Arizona, southern Nevada. Winter storm warnings trailing up through the mountains of Utah and going on up into the Northern Rockies. And then we have various flood advisories and flash flood and flood watches up as we go westward toward Northern California and into parts of Oregon. So all of this is at least telling you the fact that what's going on in the plains, that you do have what is going to be, I think, a major storm before this is all said and done. And there's going to be some big snows that are going to fall out of this. 1 foot plus snows. This is the Weather Service forecast through 8 a.m. on Thursday. And you can see a large area here from northeastern Wyoming across South Dakota into southwestern Minnesota, going for a foot plus in a lot of areas. And the southern edge of this runs down into parts of Nebraska and Kansas, and also on the northern side into southernmost North Dakota. There'll probably be a bit more added to this on the on the northern flank going forward over the next day or two, so we'll be paying attention to that. Further to the east, of course, with what's happening in Maine, we're looking at a large area of, again, up to a foot in interior Maine, lesser amounts to the north, lesser amounts to the south. One of the tough things this time of year is trying to figure out what falls during the daytime, because we are at April the 8th, and even though temperatures are cold there, you're going to have snow. It falls during the daytime. It's going to have a tough time accumulating even in that great snow state of Maine. And then some lesser amounts as you go back into northern New Hampshire and Vermont, and into parts of northeastern New York State. In the west, whoops, jumped up a little too fast, but let's get this to be a little bit wider. There you go. So here's how it looks like from the standpoint of the Rockies, where you are going to see some pretty hefty amounts in some places. There's a 23 print there in northeastern Utah. I'm going to have to figure out what that point exactly is. And there's a 27 print in western Wyoming. So we are talking about big snows here. And, of course, the other issue going forward is going to be severe weather. And I want to touch on a couple of things with regards to what's happening tonight in the land of severe weather. So we'll bring up the Storm Prediction Center's severe outlook for this evening and tonight into tomorrow morning. They have added a slight risk area during this afternoon. They added a slight risk area for parts of northern Mississippi and northern Alabama. They also earlier today added an enhanced risk for western North Carolina into southern Virginia, and that's of course embedded inside an area of slight risk, which is therefore embedded inside an expanded area of marginal risk that goes from the central Gulf Coast all the way up into the mid-Atlantic, as far north as southern Delaware. The other areas, just some general thunderstorms extend into southern New England. I don't know how much you're going to see as far as the thunderstorm is concerned into southern New England with the marine layer that's in play. We've got a risk area across the west in northern Nevada, southern Idaho, southern Oregon, northern California, and up the west coast, and then a small area in around northern Wisconsin and northeastern Minnesota. So a pretty busy severe weather evening. The blue box, of course, indicating an ongoing severe thunderstorm watch that we have at the moment. And with regards to what is going to happen over the next couple of days with this developing storm out in the plains, it's going to get busy out there. In the meantime, just want to point out that for Tuesday, we have a second front that's dropping down from the north, and you have this leftover low that is moving across the Gulf states and into toward the southeast. So we do have a continuation of a slight risk for severe weather in much of Georgia, not the western part so much, but the eastern part of Georgia, where the slight risk is virtually all of South Carolina and most of southwestern and southeastern North Carolina, getting into a slight risk encased inside a marginal risk area that goes all the way down to the Florida Keys and on up into southern Virginia. So that is going to be for day 2, and then day 3, which now takes us to Wednesday into Thursday. We start to see with the storm developing out in the plains, there is, in the warm sector, you're going to have a marginal to slight risk showing up in parts of northeastern Kansas, southeastern Nebraska. And then on Thursday, this is again in that day 4 to 8 outlook. So anytime you see something like this in the day 4 to day 8 outlook, you want to pay attention. It is showing a 15% risk of severe weather in a good chunk of the state of Illinois, western Indiana, western Kentucky, and northwestern Tennessee. So let's watch this and how it expands. I think that this could certainly wind up being being bigger once we get closer to the time frame with the severe weather with this storm that's going to be developing out in the plain states. I want to show you the surface map tonight because, at least for my neck of the woods, it's a pretty interesting scenario, and it's something that in the spring, if you're a forecaster, you really want to just kind of pull every hair out of your head, especially if you live along this frontal boundary, because we do have a bit of a backdoor front. Overnight, we had a warm front go by. Okay, well, that's come to a grinding halt. There's a weak wave in southeastern New England being analyzed, and this was at 18Z. Let's see if the 21Z map is up, and it is not as of yet. But look, I don't know if you guys can see this well. I'll try and get a bit tighter here. But take a look at these temperatures up through Maine. They're in the mid-20s here. This was at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Mid-20s to around 30. You've got these 3-star moderate snows going on. So that's pretty cold air going up through New Brunswick and Nova Scotia for this time of year. This is pretty cold air with temperatures in the 20s to around 30. Well, that cold air is trying to bleed southwestward behind this little surface low that's in southeastern New England. So we're going to watch closely this cold front now that runs right along the coast of Connecticut, back up to just north and west of Danbury. I was looking at the temperatures earlier. For example, Danbury was up at 70, and Waterbury, which is not that far from Danbury at all, was 49. There was a 21-degree temperature change over a matter of about a handful of miles, literally. And, of course, the warmer air getting into New Jersey today, but particularly central and south Jersey, parts of southeastern Pennsylvania, down into Maryland and northeastern Virginia, where we had temperatures rise up above 80 degrees, many of these areas seeing their first 80-degree readings of the season. And now we've got this southern system and this stalled frontal boundary, warm tropical air on the east side, temperatures into the 80s, dew points in some cases in the mid to upper 60s. So it was all pretty ripe here for severe weather, and hence you've got the slight to enhanced risk. And the low with this, back down in northeastern Louisiana, is one that really isn't going to be doing very much other than kind of sliding out to the east over the next 24 to 36 hours. So that is creating the severe weather risk that we see for tomorrow for Georgia, South Carolina, into North Carolina, and down into Florida, all the way down through South Florida and into the Keys. The surface map close up. Look at this. Is what I'm dealing with here, folks, from a forecast standpoint. This is why I don't like the spring at all. So Danbury now has gone to a northeast wind. So they've had their wind shift, and they've seen their temperature drop from near 70 to now to 54. Waterbury is 43. It's not that many miles from Danbury to Waterbury. 54 at Bridgeport, 48 at New Haven. It's all in the upper 40s. You go up into northern Connecticut, Hartford's at 43, and then further north, this is at Windsor Locks at Bradley International, it's 41, and you head up into Massachusetts, and you've got temperatures in the mid to upper 30s. All these winds here are north, and now they've gone northwest. These winds here in southeastern New England were in the other direction not too many hours ago. So this front is really going to wreak havoc on my forecast for here. You're going to see that chilly air begin to move across Long Island, where it struggled all day today. Finally, at around 3 or 4 o'clock, the temperatures jumped up into the 60s to near 70 in western Suffolk and Nassau County. And then we made mid and upper 70s in and around New York City, upper 70s and low 80s down into South Jersey. We still have an 81 at Mount Holly as of 6 o'clock. And you can see the 70s down in through Pennsylvania and into Maryland. There's some rain now moving into Maryland itself, and the radar is getting fairly busy here, both in the northern fringe of this, running into Maryland and northern Virginia and West Virginia. But you can see that there's some thunderstorms breaking out in southwest Virginia, western North Carolina. There's what appears to be a developing line of storms in western South Carolina, snaking southward, and there's more storms, another line that's forming in southern Georgia and into northern Florida. There's a line of storms out in the Gulf of Mexico moving east. So it's a pretty busy severe weather potential evening here as these storms mature in the next hour or so. Meanwhile, up in Maine, as we take a look at the radar here, up in northern New England. So this is the snow that is moving through now, and we saw on those observations the moderate snows. We've got showers moving up into the upper Midwest and the upper lakes there. The showers that extend back into southeastern Louisiana. You can see the turning here. There's an upper air. There's a shortwave trough there in the bottom part of the jet stream that is moving on through. And then out in the west, we are seeing rains into Northern California and a pretty busy weather day across Oregon and into Washington as all that moisture and energy start to move inland. And of course, this is going to be the next weather system, the system that's going to probably be a blizzard for areas in the northern plains. Would not at all be surprised to see some blizzard warnings go up along the way with this. Here's a tight view of the northeast radar. Make sure I got the freshest one, and I do. The gap in between, the snow up in Maine, the thunderstorms and severe weather down, potential severe weather down in parts of Virginia and North Carolina. Again, if you're just as a reminder, be sure if you're watching this later on a replay, we're at 6:15 Eastern Time. Make sure you check for the latest weather information regarding severe weather in your area by going to weather.gov. Here's the southeast radar view tonight, and again, the squall line, what looks like a developing squall line there in southeast Georgia and in northeastern Florida, moving eastward, and other thunderstorms up into parts of North Carolina. So let's run through what's going on here with regards to the weather going forward, because you do have a very complex scenario. One of the things that you got to be really careful of whenever you have any kind of blocking in the upper atmosphere, which we do at the moment, you are displacing the jet stream pretty far south of where it should be. And when you're doing that in areas like the central and southern plains and in the Midwest, the Gulf states, the southeast, when you're doing it this time of year, particularly when you start getting even deeper into the month of April or into May, this is a recipe for severe weather. And with energy coming in from the Pacific, you have to watch this closely as we go through the week. Here's the way the upper air is reacting now. If you look up where Greenland is, there's that blocking high. We talked about this last week. One of the things that the models have been really struggling with is the strength of that block. How long does it last? It seems to come and go. On some runs, you've got it very strong. Other runs, it weakens it. It looks like to me that the block is going to weaken somewhat as we move through this week, but there's enough there that you're still dealing with this suppressed jet. And in the Pacific, you've got this very strong shortwave that is coming in to the northwest that's going to drop down into the central Rockies and really gets wrapped up here on Thursday with this wrapped up closed upper low that runs through Kansas and into Nebraska and then eventually lifts up into the Great Lakes. That, I think, this is the look where you can wind up with a pretty serious severe weather outbreak. And I think that this is the reason why the Storm Prediction Center has got that 15% risk in that day 4 time frame. So when you got this setup like this with this strong this strong deep shortwave that comes in and deepens into a fairly wrapped up, closed off upper low, you've got to consider whether there could be a widespread severe weather outbreak in some places in the Midwest and in the Ohio Valley, perhaps later this week. We're of course going to certainly keep an eye on this. And in the meantime, in the east, of course, you've got this troughing in the east that we're dealing with. And just to back it up through today, you've got energy that is swinging down through southeastern Canada that's going to move through here tomorrow with another weather front to finally get this stuff that's going on here out of the way. And we'll see a bit of a ridge that develops ahead of the deep trough out in the middle of the country for Wednesday and Thursday. And then that trough is going to lift up and open up and move into southeastern Canada. It'll be a weakening system at that point. So we'll probably deal with a cold front reaching the East Coast at the end of the week. But there's another round of Pacific energy dropping in mid and late week that moves down into the southwest and then moves across the southern states and lifts up into the northeast later next weekend. So that'll be that's kind of setting the table up for a weather system for perhaps, say, later next Sunday, which is Palm Sunday, into a week from today. So busy pattern indeed going forward as far as the upper air is concerned. We're really kind of in full springtime mode here with regards to the upper air pattern. Very, very volatile time. 2 seasons kind of fighting it out, really. So here's your surface map from the GFS today. The European's not that much different. We have this southern system that is part of the mechanism that's triggering the severe weather tonight in the east, in the southeast. Well, that's going to weaken a little bit as it moves eastward, but there's still enough there for potential for severe weather tomorrow. And of course, here in the east, you've got this first short wave goes out, another one comes right behind it. More snow for Maine, cold front for my area late tomorrow afternoon and evening with a shower or maybe even a thunderstorm if the marine layer, except where there's a marine layer. And now watch the system in the west as this low drops into Colorado and then gets very deep here, a 979 low sitting in southern Kansas for Thursday. By the way, we're looking at the 12Z model run. I'm going to bring up the 18Z in a moment. But this is a really wrapped up storm here that lifts up to the northeast. And here's your chance for Thursday night into Friday morning in the western parts of the Ohio Valley, and then on Friday, perhaps further east in the Ohio Valley. This front coming into the east, the low at this point, of course, well past its peak in terms of pressure and starts to fill as it moves on up into the northeast and into Canada with some chilly air behind it. And now that southern stream system, which both the European and the GFS have, moving out of the Gulf states later next weekend and then moving up. This is where, how much blocking do you have? Are you going to wind up with a low that goes into West Virginia and then redevelops, or are we going to wind up with a low that's going to try to run up the west side of the Appalachians? That's going to really depend on how much blocking do you have in order to force a low to go out underneath my area. And that means northeast winds and really gloomy, miserable conditions with temperatures in the upper 30s and low 40s and rain for next Sunday night into Monday afternoon. Not exactly something that I am looking forward to. So let's jump to the latest GFS model runs just to see if there's any changes here. And no, in fact, there aren't any changes. Why? Because the GFS is running late on tropical tidbits. He did mention that he's going to be starting some overnight server maintenance, but it didn't say it was going to impact the GFS. So maybe there's an issue and it's coming out slow for everybody. But look, you get the general idea of what's going on here with our weather going forward, that we've got a very volatile pattern ahead of us for this week. The Weather Prediction Center, WPC, has rainfall amounts this week fairly substantial east of the Rockies in most places, particularly in the central Gulf states, the lower Mississippi Valley through the Tennessee Valley and into the southeast. A lot of this is thunderstorm induced, obviously, and we're looking at a large area of several inches or more. In the northeast, it looks like about an inch to an inch and a half of liquid precip this week. You've got big precip amounts in the plains and in the upper Midwest with that storm that's going to be developing and headed there for the middle and latter part of this week. And then we have out in the Northwest, right along the coast from Oregon to Washington, some amounts of several inches or more being indicated there. There was something, you know what, I forgot to bring it up. Let's see if I can find it. It's not that often that you see this. Let's see if they still have the link to it, and they do. Okay, so I'm going to bring up the from WPC in terms of their probability of snow, because you don't really see this too often in its long range, but I thought this was fairly telling. And considering, again, when you have all models in agreement like this, even 72 hours out, It's pretty gutsy to do this. It's hard to argue with what's being shown, though. And this is from WPC. This is their probability. And, we can adjust this to the parameters that they give in terms of snowfall. I actually am putting here, this is the 72-hour, this is going out to Thursday, of the probability of a foot or more. And, oh, it just changed on me. Oh, because I moved the day. Okay, so here is the probability. This is through Thursday evening. That's pretty substantial here as far as the kind of probability that they're indicating. I'm sorry, my mouse is moving the screen. I want to just show you. Here's a better view so you can see the legend on the side. So the blue, the first darkest blue, is a 40% probability of a foot or more, and that very, very small area of bright blue is 70 to 80% probability of a foot or more. These are really high numbers for this far out. So WPC has very high confidence. And when I looked at all the models and in terms of what's going on in the upper air with respect to this system, you really can't argue against it. Here's what the upper air looks like. I mean, you really do have this very deep trough that forms out in the west here for this week. There's the energy that comes in. This is on Tuesday, and look what it does. I mean, it just dives down into the Southern Rockies, just gets really wrapped up and closed off here. Ridge pops up in the east, and then you've got second energy behind it that drops down into the northwest. That is the system that's going to go into the east for Sunday night and Monday. But you can see how the upper air is reacting here. Troughing to the east of New England is keeping things relatively busy in northern New England, of course. And you've got this short wave that's going to swing through here for Monday and Tuesday. Then that pulls out, and then you got this wrapped up energy that intensifies here in the plains with a ridge building in the east, a second trough that drops in behind it, and then that swings out and heads towards the east for later in the weekend and early next week. Very, very active pattern indeed. And then going forward, it looks like to me like the blocking wants to weaken, and in which case, at least if weather systems are moving along, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And this will bring in some warmer days if the long range is correct, even though you're going to probably wind up with cold fronts coming through every couple of days or so. At least that's my guess at this point. I didn't really spend a whole lot of time looking at the long range today. There's too much going on in the short range. I figured I'd keep that front and center. So let me bring myself up full screen here and join everybody on the chat board. It's a quiet Monday. We don't have a huge crowd, but it's nice to see the regulars here. Mahogany, Johnny Quest, Robert Brown, Chuck Cardillo, Seth Dominus, G-Train. I saw Scott Briller earlier. Robert Brown, Okie AG. Haven't seen you in a while. Glad to see you here. G-Train, T-Bear, 99 Wolves, who's visiting today. Chris Tamarine, nice to see you on board. SG on board too. Jason Schaefer, Mark Glatfelter. If I forget you guys, be forgiving here. Just I don't like missing people. Always wind up missing someone. Timothy Veltman, Paul Roman, Johnny Quest, I know he was on earlier. James NASCAR fan. Okay, so I think I got everybody. Amy Hogan. Okay. And Charlie Baker. Mirtha Gunter is on. Nice to see you. You got thunderstorms to keep you busy, Mirtha, tonight. Kristinapedia. Fog and in the hills of Rocky Point, Kristen. Yeah, that front is backing, that backdoor front backing westward now, and that is going to be problematic with temperatures. I do not like the spring as a forecaster. This is just not a good time of year for me. Okay, it just isn't. There's too much. You can go from 55 to 85 over a handful of 200 miles from the northeast to the southwest. It's hard to forecast that, and it's hard to communicate that clearly because the people in the raw, they kind of jump on the numbers that make them feel the best. So everybody's going to want that temperature closer to 80, and then they forget to listen to the fact that, hey, if you're on the coast, that's not going to be the case. Bill, the fishing Saturday, it was. I mean, I have fun, and I'm always relaxed whether I catch anything or not. My buddies that were with me, I mean, we just kind of went out for a few hours out east, and they each caught a pickerel. I didn't catch anything. I lost one lure, got caught in the spillway. But the water's still probably a little bit too cold. Need a few warm days to get the water temperatures up a bit. The fish didn't look like they were pretty active. They didn't give my they didn't give my buddies, when they hooked the fish on the line, much of a fight. So got to get that water temperature up just a little bit, maybe another couple of weeks. Although on Long Island, again, it's always a struggle to get those water temperatures to move up. Jiba Treesful, I'm going catfishing this weekend in Valdosta, Georgia. I'm going to be down in Georgia in about a month or so. So I'm going to bring in my fishing poles with me. So maybe I'll get an opportunity to do a little Georgia fishing while I'm there. Trish and Lou, 2 feet in West Wisconsin, 4 feet in Southwest Minnesota. Well, look, this is going to be a big snow producer. I don't know about topside numbers, but certainly the potential for somebody to get a foot or more out of this storm is there. We'll watch and see how it sets up. Did I leave that WPC map up yet? I did. So this is only at least through. They do have the probability, even into western Wisconsin, they have a fairly high probability of at least a foot over a large area in the west central part of the state. For this time frame, that's pretty good. I'm just for laughs. They even put up an 18-inch area, which you don't see that too often, but they've got a 20 to 30% probability of 18 inches in parts of southeastern South Dakota and in southwestern Iowa. So this is through Thursday evening, 7 o'clock. This is going to be a big storm for the plains and for parts of the upper Midwest. I don't know about how far east that snow is going to get, but certainly in those areas in the plain states, they are not done. And a lot of those areas have seen quite the winter with regards to snowfall. Many of those areas setting monthly records in February for snowfall. So this is it was their winter from that respect. Chris Tamarine, the lakes play a big part with our winter weather, and it seems if any snowstorms the Toledo area gets any more, the lows must go right over into the Ohio Valley, right up to the west of Pennsylvania. Yeah, we get into these cycles. We get into these cycles that last for a long time, decadal cycles, and it changes how weather occurs in certain areas. We've seen examples of that in my area, how winters have behaved for the last 20 years have been far snowier than they were in the prior 30. And my area is not the only area. All parts of the country, this is part of a normal process. You get these decadal shifts. They last 10 years, 20 years, sometimes 30 years, or long enough where a generation gets used to weather happening a certain way, and then it suddenly changes on you, and you're learning new things. I think that's how I view my experience with how the winters that I grew up with in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and then how they've been in the last 20 years, in the last 2 decades, which really have been a whole lot different than what they were in those prior 30 years. All right, going to leave it here at this point, folks. So we'll probably have a Joe and Joe weather show tonight on Facebook. So that's roughly at 9:25 p.m. Eastern Time on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Chaffee. So do join us from there. And if you're not on Facebook, not to worry. I usually upload the Joe and Joe show onto my YouTube channel, and if we get it, if I can get it done, if we get the show over with by 9:45, I can have it up here by 10 o'clock Eastern. Can't promise that, but I will definitely try. And of course, we'll be back tomorrow night right here on my YouTube channel with all the latest, either 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock, not sure which one. I often don't know until I'm actually here to be able to schedule it. So tonight it was at 6 o'clock. I wish I could give you a definite time, but just watch during the day. As soon as I know, I will schedule it, and you can, set your own personal schedule to be here or watch it later on a replay. And again, one more time, severe weather. This is you're watching this on a replay, so the radars are dated. Make sure you check your local National Weather Service website for the latest watches and warnings, if any, by going to weather.gov. Have a great evening, everybody. We will either see you later or we'll see you tomorrow.